I'm Jeff Breedlove with the American Addiction Recovery Association in conversation with Cammie Wolf Rice, my dear friend. Cammie, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
You know, Cammie, I wanted to invite you on, and we're honored that you came on because I believe that addiction, the addiction epidemic, the addiction disease is a family disease, that it impacts family members as much as it impacts a person like me who's actually in active addiction at one point. And you personify what it means, I think, as a family member who was impacted by this disease, not once, but twice, with two different family members who turned that lived experience into action. So tell us a little bit about who Cammie is, and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, unfortunately, my story starts with a tragedy. My oldest son had a health crisis and was seriously overprescribed Oxycontin, and he ended up fighting addiction, literally hijacked his brain, and he fought addiction for 14 plus years until he lost his battle with an overdose in 2016. And then a few years later, my brother ran out of a Xanax prescription, and a supposed friend gave him a fake pill and with fentanyl, and it killed my only, and I always say my first best friend, right? It was my only sibling. So really have been impacted by the opioid epidemic and the fentanyl crisis. They're two separate but highly related, and through death, unfortunately. So literally had to take the pain and put it into action because there's a fire inside me. That's the only way I know how to explain it, because I want to prevent any other person on this earth to have to deal with loss like this, because it's so brutal. And so, yeah, is the pain there? It's always there. It's always going to be there. But having purpose and really feeling like, our swim lane with CWC Alliance is prevention, because I want to stop it before it ever starts.
Now, tell us about the CWC Alliance.
Well, I kind of said, well, let's pick the hardest thing in the world to do. Let's develop a new position in hospitals, which, there hasn't been a new position in hospitals in over a decade. But if you look at our society, Jeff, did we not use coaches for everything? Imagine watching the UGA football game with not one coach on the sideline. We use coaches for everything, multiple coaches in that instance, right? But when you're in a health crisis, there's no coach at patient bedside. There's no coach. And I felt like that's what my son was missing all the times in the hospital. It was literally a missing piece to the healthcare team to have a coach there if you have to be on an opioid. Number one, you need to know that you're on an opioid, what that means. If you have to be on one, how quickly you need to taper off, and provide non-addictive solutions to pain management. And then there's the mental side of being sick. So we provide coping skills to deal with anxiety, stress, depression, PTSD. If you're in the hospital, you might have all four of those things. And nurses just unfortunately do not have time, nor have they had that specific training to be at that patient bedside to do those coaching. And honestly, a lot of times people just need a listening ear that they can vent to. And when you validate someone's pain and you listen, then you uncover all these other comorbidities. It might be food insecurity, home insecurity, domestic violence, where normally that patient would fall through the crack and get discharged from the hospital. Now we can provide those extra resources.
No, excellent. And we're going to pivot deeper into CWC in just a minute. But before we do, I have to tell you that you've done something that not a lot of people do, maybe more than we think actually, but you've actually written a book.
Yes,
called The Flight, right here. And I have read the book, and I have listened to the book on tape, an audio version of the book. So what I want you briefly to tell people kind of what's the premise of The Flight. And then let's talk about where people can read and listen to The Flight after that. But what is The Flight? What's the book about?
Well, I never thought I would be an author ever. And I did have help. I'm going to admit to that. It was 18 months of grueling. It was hard. It was the hardest thing probably I've ever, it was hard. But I felt like I wasn't hitting the masses. And I thought, if I write a book, it's going to cast a wider net. And when I initially did it, so look, I'm obviously sharing my story, sharing Christopher's story. However, God took over the book. And it really it makes you think about your journey, your life. And I use the analogy of a flight because, look, we all land at different places in our life, right? We land at success and happiness and marriage and having children, or sickness, grief, loss, death, all the things. And we all have this turbulence that we sometimes hit. But when you're flying and you hit you're having a bumpy flight and you land and you're like, right? Or you got to refuel. So I use the analogy, and I kind of mixed fiction because that was the best way I knew how to describe the pain and how I got through. But really reading about my journey makes you think about your own journey. I also put QR codes after every chapter so that I can keep it updated. In the back, there's a resource library. There's a music playlist. There's, just things that I can keep it always updated. And then I personally, yes, thank you. I personally did the audiobook. I read it myself because I didn't want anybody else to read my story. So that was interesting, therapeutic journey as well. So I really feel like in the response I've gotten, oh my gosh, it's made me feel so good because I do feel like it's helped people that have had loss. But it's also, just strangely enough, a lady sent me a note and said, I just want you to know I read your book, and I finally started the bakery I've always wanted to start. And I was like, what?
That's amazing.
Like, that has nothing to do with, she said, no, you inspired me to do what I needed to do on my journey. So anyway, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
No, that is amazing. And I think what makes the book a page turner is there's also nonfiction in here. And I don't want to give it away, but I'll do like a movie teaser. You talk about a home invasion, let's just say that. And the reader wants to know what happens in the narrative. So if you're looking for a book, it's not War and Peace. It's a good read. It's not a hard read. It's a good read, but it's also a good listen. And the book is available, I know, on Amazon.
Yes.
And I'm sure where all books are sold at bookstores around America, because we're going to a national audience here. So but I'm sure at any store, but it's also available online on the audio platforms, right?
All audio platforms. And I'd like to just say this too. I've done a lot of book clubs. If you are listening and you have a current book club and you want me to join in as an author on Zoom, I've actually gone in person. I did a book club with some women in Italy, which was fascinating to hear their perspective on it. Yes, I did have. It's interesting enough. I did have a home invasion. And at the time, I thought I was going to write a book about that. And that only ended up being one chapter of my life in the book.
Right.
No,
it is good. I like to listen to books on tape when people say, well, Jeff, you're everywhere, you're driving around. Well, usually I'm listening to a book on tape, maybe a podcast, but usually a book on tape. And I listened to the flight during a drive one time. So yes, we got a great book here, but you're so much more than a book. I mean, for a lot of people, they'd write a book and that'd be it. But no, the CWC Alliance, now I know it has 3 major pillars, and you've already alluded to one of those, but it really does more than the 3. We'll talk about the 3. But for example, you just hosted an inaugural conference at Mercer University about it was a prevention conference, and you tied it into the Georgia Recovers bus tour, and you had Mercer University's medical operation involved. So you're building CWC. You're still building it, I think.
absolutely.
And you're putting foundational events in place now, inaugural events in place now. But briefly tell us about this conference that you just hosted.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, it was on Christopher's heavenly birthday. I try to do something new and innovative in honor of him so that he did not die in vain, right? And so it was a big day. Usually it's a brutal day for me, but it was his heavenly birthday, our first conference. It was called Prescription for Prevention. Healthcare workers that came received continued education credit through Mercer School of Medicine. And it's all about partnership. And we had just tremendous partners. Jeff, you participated on a panel and did a phenomenal phenomenal job. And, it's really just continuing to educate people and talking about real things like stigma, talking about the success of the life care specialist. We brought them in from multiple rural hospitals from all over the state of Georgia. They came in from Arkansas. My goal every year is to have this conference. We're already planning for next year. Look, my North Star is to have life care specialists in every hospital in the country, and it's doable. I promise you. And go ahead.
No. Well, that's great. Let's go right there to that. So one of the pillars are the life care specialists, and that is it's more than a vision now. It's something that has been implemented, like you said, in multiple states. Tell people why you think a life care specialist is. I get it from a patient perspective. We have coaches everywhere, but how is it going to transform the way that the medical community deals with people seeking help from addiction?
Well, really, it's not. It is a preventative role, but I built the position based on everything that my son did not have multiple times in the hospital. What I did not have as a caretaker. So listen, life is, if you haven't been in the hospital, God bless. If you haven't had a family member in the hospital, put your seatbelt on, because that's life. People get sick. People have health crisis. So it might not be you. And God forbid, I don't want anybody to be in the hospital, right? But if you have to be in the hospital, or a loved one has to be in the hospital, you need to understand A, the medication you're taking. B, you need to know how to manage your pain. If you're in the hospital, most likely you're in some kind of pain. We as a culture have been programmed ill pill. We're in the hospital. This hurts. Give me a pill to fix it. The problem is pills can take you down and change the trajectory of your life. There are other things you can do to distract your brain when you're in pain. So it's not just for somebody that already has substance misuse, which we do have a risk assessment. We help people get into treatment, but this is for everybody that's in the hospital.
For everybody
that's in the hospital. If you're in the hospital, you probably have pain. You need to be educated on the medication, and you need to have pain management techniques to deal with your pain. Does that make sense?
Cammie, perfect sense. Because like me, you've heard, I'm sure, from hundreds and thousands, frankly, of families that say that nobody was ever in active addiction, but nobody told us about the pills, and before we knew it, I or my loved one was in active addiction. In some way, shape, or form, it didn't end positively. And this has the chance, like you said, for any and everybody that goes into the hospital, to leave the hospital as healthy as they possibly can.
That's right. Do you know that there's thousands of young people that went in the hospital? Let's use the example, a football injury, right? Broke their ankle, and they leave with 35 Percocet, and it changes their whole trajectory.
Well, Cammie, our mutual friend Doreen Barr lost her son, Ryan, a football player, a football injury, handed what you just a handful. It doesn't matter what the motives were; it matters what the reality is. And the more educated we are, the more people are going to live. And it's not to say that there's not a place for medication. There is, but there's got to be better education for it and a better respect for it. Look, you also at CWC, you have two other main pillars. You're really working on workforce innovation, and I wanted you to spend a minute or two of our short time together today telling us a little bit about the workforce innovation and initiative that you're working on.
So all the training that we have pulled modules, and our team, we do webinars, we do in-person training, and we have a complete library of things that we train on. We're all certified with the Trauma Resource Institute. So we teach coping skills to deal with the mental side of being ill. So we teach pain management. We teach storytelling to break stigma. We teach opioid education. We teach about fentanyl. We have a whole library of things to choose from. We just finished a 6-webinar series with the Nevada Opioid Excellence School there in Nevada, We didn't go to Nevada one time. We just did it all. It was a 6-week series, and we got on for 2 hours. The healthcare workers received continued education, and we did our training. So we've trained over 2,000 frontliners, nurses that are supporting patients. They're burnt out, right? They're stressed out. They need coping skills to deal with anxiety, stress, depression, PTSD. So we've been teaching our trauma evidence-based skills to frontliners as well. So we want to just take all the knowledge that we have and continue to share it. Many people have grants out there, and that's what happened with the opioid with Nevada. They had a grant and they hired us as the vendor to come in and train. We've also trained peer specialists out there on pain management. So yes, that is a big pillar for us, is the training piece. And then the third pillar is we basically took all the life care specialist training and we put a youth friendly wrapper around it with a bow. Okay. So we just received opioid settlement money. We are partnered with Resilient Georgia, launching statewide the Youth Prevention Network. Basically, it's training and certifying adults that service youth on opioid epidemic, fentanyl crisis, naloxone, and mental health skills. Our young people are suffering. There's just been so many suicides. There's been so many things that self-medicating, and we've got to arm our young people with and giving them a certification and empowering them. And we didn't put this program together in a silo. We sat down with focus tables with young people and say, how do we reach your peers? And so young people get certified, and we train the young people, and the young people train the young people. That's the secret sauce. It's peer-to-peer training. And so we're super excited. We're launching that statewide, and then we are looking at expanding that nationally as well.
So that's so important. Going back to the workplace training for frontliners, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but in our home state of Georgia, I've come to understand the small number of continuing education hours that doctors and nurses are required under law on basically mental health and addiction, and it's not appropriate. The number is way too small given the science of this disease. So that's where an intersection of where we're going to need to show through action, like at places like CWC, that there are solutions, but we're going to need policy in places that where elected officials at least have a discussion and make a decision. Are they going to require medical associations and medical authorities to require more training and awareness around? It's the number one cause of death for Americans 18 to 45. And I get it that there's stigma out in the civilian world, but it's almost like even in the medical community, people are like, ho hum. And until we prioritize not just the deaths, but also the people that survive and have all the medical conditions of a survivor, mental health conditions and physical conditions, we're going to continue to see it grow. So that's where you showing that there is a solution to get training to people can intersect with the policy area of saying, well, we've got to, apparently we're going to have to mandate that there be more training and awareness, because right now families are suffering.
Absolutely.
Because a doctor will tell you, I get an hour of training a year on this.
Well, our chief medical officer, Dr. Mara Shanker, she's the chief orthopedic trauma surgeon at one of the top trauma hospitals in the country, Grady in Atlanta. And at our conference, when I was interviewing her, if you recall, I asked her, how many hours of training did you get on addiction? And the answer was zero. Zero. Now, come on. This is the largest epidemic our country's ever faced. We absolutely need our doctors, our nurses to embrace and learn. And, I get it. Like, nurses have sometimes been in bad situations, in an overdose situation, in an emergency room. They've, when somebody is triggering and really needing that medication, they can become very agitated and very hard to deal with, right? So I understand that they do need some training to understand the disease and that it's the disease speaking, not that person's still in there. Because I dealt with that with Christopher, when he was triggering,
Right.
needed that opioid. So I've been through that. And so really that is exactly right. We've got to require continued education and not just doing an online hour, check a box and go to the next thing. We have to look at how we're prescribing. There was a database set up in every state. And initially, I understand that was to make sure that people that were in full blown addiction are not doctor shopping, but it should also be for regulation of physicians that are overprescribing and red flagging. And I know for a fact when doctors received a letter, and I might not be popular saying this, but I don't get a paycheck, so nobody can fire me, Jeff. This is the beautiful thing. And when they got a letter, from the DEA and from the opioid coordinators in states, the medical community went berserk over that. Why? Why? If a doctor is overprescribing, and it's not just doctors, by the way, many dentists are overprescribing. When your
Yes.
loved one is going to get their wisdom teeth pulled, they do not need 30 Percocet, period. End of story. They need Motrin and ice. And so there's been so many addictions has started just with a wisdom tooth extraction. So we have to really come together. And that's why every time I get a microphone to speak, I'm going to speak the truth. We've got to do more education, and prevention, because once addiction does start, it affects, as you just said, the ecosystem family. And it literally is so traumatic and hard on the entire family, on the siblings, on the parents, on the aunts and the uncles. It's just hard. And it's not like a quick fix and you send somebody, you write a check and you go to rehab for 30 days. Let's forget that. That doesn't work. It's something that will affect the family the rest of their lives in supporting that individual. And
No, absolutely.
right. And recovery's real. I mean, look,
No, it's real, but addiction's real too. And it doesn't just impact the family, it impacts the business community, it impacts the local governments and their budgets, and which means it impacts every single taxpayer. And so it's not just a healthcare issue, it's frankly a taxpayer dollar issue, it's a business community dollar issue. It impacts, like you said, everything holistically. And it is time. I think in 2025 and 6, we're at the point of the epidemic, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, where two things are true, or I think they're true. One, fentanyl is a game changer, and the age of experimentation is over for anybody of any age. This isn't the 70s and 80s and 2000s where you could try something and, oh, that's, kids being kids, or, oh, he was just stressed out, he tried it. No, fentanyl has changed the game. I think that's one premise for 25 and 26 we got to have moving forward. The second premise is we're going to have to take these policy discussions to deeper levels, to places like medical associations, um, uh, associations that represent legal authorities, sheriffs and chiefs of police and district attorneys, and have some hard conversations about how we address this epidemic in 2025 and 26. It's got to be different than the way we addressed it 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. When I was in active addiction 9 years ago, nobody ever even said the word fentanyl. I don't even know that it was a thing on the street. So just in less than a decade's time, the reality of the disease, the reality of the epidemic has changed. And if you're making your policy decisions based off the reality of a decade ago, are you serving people today? So those are two things I think have changed. How does a group like CWC play a role in that?
Well, I will say historically, our country has not been, we're not well at preventing things, right? We wait till diabetes blows up and then we have a whole prevention campaign. We have to get and look at how many deaths, right? I mean, how many deaths have happened with the fentanyl crisis and the opioid epidemic? We only spend historically 3% on preventive solutions. That is changing. That is changing here in Georgia because CWC has received opioid abatement settlement money that I'm incredibly grateful for. That has started the life care specialist in multiple hospitals. We've had 300% growth. If you're a hospital healthcare worker, if you're working for a hospital and you want to know how to apply for the life care specialist program, reach out to us. Cammie at cwc.ngo. Yes, I'm doing a commercial because the money is there. Just hospitals need to know that they can apply for the program no matter what state you are. And we're the vendor that supports it and provides it. But it's letting people know that it's out there. That's the big thing, Jeff. And by you giving me this platform to share our mission, it's people like you that helps us grow, that helps us do what we need to do. But, look, Harvard Business School did a case study on this position. And because we had so much growth, they've decided to follow us on our entire journey. Harvard Business School. I mean, this is a big deal. It is doable to have this in every hospital. And I've got a huge focus on the rural hospitals. They're hurting right now.
Oh, they're very much hurting. Yeah.
They need this position yesterday.
Right. I mean, rural America was rural Georgia. When they rolled out the 988 test program in Georgia, the team thought that the highest volume of calls in the test area would come from urban Atlanta, but they didn't. They came from Southwest Georgia, rural Georgia. Rural America is crying out for help, and rural hospitals face economic realities on top of medical necessities. And so anything we can do in rural America, and I mean, that's Idaho and Wyoming and rural New York and rural California and rural every state. Mm-hmm. Look, we have just a couple of minutes left. And at the end, I am going to ask you to repeat how people get in touch with you and CWC on social media. But I want to also spend a minute or two here talking about a documentary that I've had the great privilege to see 3 times. I think I'm going to see it 4 times. We're not ready to make that public announcement here, but I want you to talk about Fentanyl Death Incorporated for a minute or two, literally. Tell us about this powerful documentary.
Yes, it's called Fentanyl Death Incorporated. Robert Marbut, he is the executive producer. Billy Baldwin is in it. Stacey James from Hope Movement is in it. It's an incredible 1 hour. Look, I think you and I are pretty much experts in this space because we live it every single day. But watching it, and I'm sure even you watching it multiple times, it just explains everything. It touches every piece of the epidemic and the fentanyl crisis in 1 hour. It's got the DEA. It's got reputable, true, evidence-based information, right? Everything in there is so educational that everybody coming out goes, whoa, I learned so much in that 1 hour. And so I literally we're waiting to see what happens. I can't really talk about it right now. It's in contract negotiations and above my pay grade type stuff, but I've done everything I can do to promote and we will be announcing it when it does hit
Right.
Netflix or Hulu or CNN or wherever.
And AARA will certainly promote that too. I think we're going to show it in Georgia at least one more time to a special audience. But I will tell you this, I want to make sure everybody hears this. It also has in there the voice of lived experience. It has a survivor voice of people with lived experience. And that voice is very much included in this documentary too. So it really is inclusive. It's diverse. It's got a large, so if you are a peer of mine, I want you to know, yes, our voice is in there. And it's a powerful documentary.
Yes.
That will make you think. You may not agree with everything you hear. You may agree with everything you hear, but you will think for sure about this from a policy perspective. It's powerful, and you can Google it. I don't think you can see it online, but you can see about it. You can read stories about it. You can maybe see a snippet here or there, but it's something you should familiarize yourself with. Fentanyl Death Incorporated, and you did. It was kind of cool to understand that two of the 2 leaders. You have a very conservative person and a very progressive person, but they put that aside and came together in unity because this has to be a nonpartisan, bipartisan effort. And I love that, a gentleman that has a great legacy with the Republican conservative movement is sitting there with Billy Baldwin, who's, as about as progressive as they come, but they're united on this issue.
They said, let's focus on the things we agree on.
Yeah.
And just think if we all had that attitude.
Right.
Let's focus on the things we agree on. They are out in the US right now doing a road show. I think they're in Austin. They're going all over the country. And because after the 1 hour documentary, then they have a panel discussion with different people on a panel. Jeff, you were on one at our conference. And yeah, let's focus on what we can agree on and attack
Right.
that.
Well, listen, we got about just a few seconds left. Tell people how they find CWC on social media.
Yes, so CWC Alliance. By the way, that stands for Christopher Wolf, my son's legacy. So it's CWC Alliance. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, and our website is cwc.ngo. And we have a lot of resources there as well. And then again, the book, The Flight. By the way, all proceeds, not a lot of proceeds come off of Amazon, but all proceeds from the book and the audio go to the nonprofit, 100%. So thank you for your support. And if you do check it out, please let me know what you think.
Absolutely. It's a great book. It's a great read. It's a great listen. CWC. This is Jeff Breedlove with the American Addiction Recovery Association in conversation with Cammie Wolf Rice. Cammie, recovery is real.
Recovery is real. Thanks, Jeff.